you spend in your entire life. It's something that you ever perfect. You get better at it, but it's something that can always be continually worked on. In communication, especially interpersonal communication, is so difficult for most people, primarily because we don't understand all the aspects that encompass that type of communication. Um, One of the biggest misconceptions is that when you're talking to somebody, you're communicating. Well, that is one of the aspects of communicating, but it is only a portion of it. For that message, for things to be communicated, the message you and the person you're communicating with, rather, have to have a shared understanding of the same idea. And just because you're saying it doesn't mean they're understanding it. It doesn't mean they're listening. It doesn't mean that they're taking it in and understanding all aspects of it. So there's multiple steps. Not only do you have to formulate your thoughts correctly about what you want to communicate, you have to verbalize those. The receiver has to be paying attention, has to desire to understand what you're talking about, and they also have to onboard that information the same way, and their base knowledge about whatever that subject matter is has to be similar enough for the concept to be transferred, and then they have to accept it. And so then at that point you've actually communicated something, and that's a lot of steps. And speaking is only one of those. So as we go through this chapter, there's some basic survival skills on how to get that done. So in here we're going to define the effective communication, what effective communication is and your role in that process. Understand why effective communication is important in both your personal and your professional life, and identify the elements rather of effective communication, and learn ways to implement effective communication in different scenarios. Because it's not only verbal; that's how we speak about it most of the time. So the spoken word is basically face-to-face, telephone, or teleconferencing, Skype or something like that. That's the way that we learn first. Then there's not actually that we learn first. The nonverbal communication we have is body language and facial expressions, your attire, your appearance. All of those things communicate something. Your body language, whether your arms are folded, that typically means that you're closed off and that you're not interested in having a conversation. Your facial expressions. Your facial expressions are one of those things that you don't necessarily do on purpose. They just kind of come through, and those are a lot of how your message is received. You can be saying one thing, but if your body language and your facial expression say something different, it's up to the receiver how they're going to receive your message. And your attire and your appearance. Now, we're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, and conversely, we're not supposed to judge people by their appearances. We're not supposed to judge them based on how they dress, how they look, how they groom themselves, how they keep themselves. But we're not supposed to. But the reality of human nature, in fact, is that we do. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that's just the way it is. And I don't know of anybody that doesn't judge people by their appearance and start to develop a portion of their spoken word or their message based on how they look. It's just the reality of human nature. It's just part of it. It's embedded in who we are. And then written communication. Some things are better written, other things are not. Certain things are good in an email, certain things are good in a letter, certain things are good in a text message, others are not. And obviously we can probably pick out some things within the chapter they'll discuss, what type of communication is best for a text message, an email, or a letter, or face-to-face. You don't want to terminate somebody through a text message or an email. You don't want to discipline things. Anything that's going to require a substantive dialogue or can be misconstrued, you're probably going to want to make that face-to-face, because people are going to want immediate feedback. If it's just transactional things, emails are really good for that, and face-to-face is probably not necessarily that necessary. Text messages are a really good form of communication for things that are very transactional, such as, hey, I'm going to be 5 minutes late text message is fine on that. You don't necessarily need to call. And then there's also visual graphs, charts, maps, and things like that. Everything has a certain entity to it. So the effect, there's some importance to communicating properly. And one is prevention of unwanted problems. If you know you're going to have a problem with the communication with somebody, if you're delivering unpleasant news, do it face to face, do it soon, and do it at the right time. You have to choose the right time to do it. It bolsters your strength and your levels of trustworthiness and honesty and respect, and it defines your moral levels in a relationship. And so communicating properly is extremely important. Pretending that you don't have a problem with another person or in a relationship and not communicating with them doesn't alleviate the problem. It just ignores it, and it gets to a boiling point, to the point where things may be in a irreparable state where you can't fix them. It's better to address a lot of small problems than one large one. That's why some relationships, like in marital discourse, they come to a natural end. They come to divorce. Primarily, it's because of communications. The communication may be over, a lot of different things, money and whatnot. But working together all the time is an important factor, and that's part of this chapter. And I realize that you probably weren't thinking that you were going to that road, but it is. Personal relationships are relationships just like business ones. So here, 4 of the research highlights within this particular chapter. Employees' perception of senior management's effective communication has one of the strongest impacts on a company's trust climate. And trust climate is really important on success of a particular entity, a corporation, a company, or any kind of organization. And then when communication channels begin to break down, misunderstandings and misrepresentations flourish, and a climate of mistrust surfaces. And that is when the communication breakdown is when it's just not happening. If managers are continually communicating with their employees, there's going to be more trust. The message may not always be great, but there's definitely going to be more trust. And here's the really big one that's really difficult for a lot of managers and leaders to embrace, is the ability to listen, communicate clearly, and it leads to the strongest effect on employees' commitment to the organization. Is if an employee believes that they have ownership in at least some of the decision-making factors that occur in a company, they're going to be more apt to be happy and to stay. And then to promote and build positive relationships of trust, senior managers should communicate as honestly and as directly as possible with their employees, particularly during uncertain times. If business is bad, employees know that, and they begin to wonder if their job is at risk. And it's important, whether the message is good or bad, for employers to affect good communication aspects with their employees and let them know exactly what's going on. Let's see. Elements of effective communication. 1, listening to understand. We're all guilty of the opposite of listening to understand. I myself am horrible at it at times. And that is when you're in a conversation with somebody and they're speaking and you're not listening to them, you're literally in your head coming up with your rebuttal or your response to what they're saying. That's not effective communication. You really need to listen to them, hear everything they have to say, and then formulate your thoughts and your process. And people are awkward with that because what it does is it leads to a pause in the conversation. And frankly, there's nothing wrong with listening to somebody and going, well, let me think about that for a minute, and coming up with a thoughtful response. There's no written rule that says you immediately have to fire back a response when somebody stops talking. And frequently, I found myself doing it as well. You just can't wait to get your response out, and you stop listening to the person who's speaking in front of you. And that's not effective communication. Good communication elements promote a win-win communication where there is that, and now we've really kind of crossed over into conflict resolution rather, and that is listening and maybe compromising. It's building trust, it's fostering accountability, and sometimes you have to be assertive. If there is something that you feel so strongly about that is so incredibly important, maybe it isn't something that's one of the items that you maybe you waver on. Maybe you do have to be assertive and authoritative about something that you know you are absolutely right about. And so as you go through the next portions of that, it really breaks down a lot of the items that I was just actually talking about. So, about promoting that win-win, fostering accountability and whatnot, building trust, all that's, there's a lot more in that chapter about that particular part there. About choosing the correct medium, your message, what you say and how you say it, and instantaneous communication. I'm going to pause on that one about instantaneous communication. We live in a world where people send text messages and emails, and you have the ability to immediately fire back a response. I can tell you from personal experience, sometimes it's best to just let it stew for a bit. Think about what you're going to say rather than providing that immediate response, especially in email. Email and text messages in business provide a level of anonymity in the communication process that frankly sometimes isn't really good. We become a little bit more aggressive. We fire off emails and text messages immediately when we're angry. And the thing about written information like text messages and emails, they are forever. Once you hit click, you can't unclick, and it's there forever. Be careful what you write, because there's no going, hey, I didn't say that, or maybe perhaps you misunderstood or I misspoke. It is written. So be careful very much what you write. Maybe if you're not a real good written communicator, maybe only write down in text messages and in emails things you're absolutely sure about, that are not negative, that are only positive. And understand that just because you're writing something angrily to a coworker, it doesn't mean that they're always only the one that's going to see it. They may pick that email up, print it, take it right to your boss, the manager, the leader, the CEO, whoever it is. Heck, if it's bad enough, it might even go on to the news. So be very careful about what you write. Those are very, very important things. Check your grammar and your spelling. I would love to say that every email that I've ever sent, every word was spelled correctly or my grammar was perfect. It wasn't. You do the best you can do. Maybe you run it through Microsoft Word or another word processor to catch your spelling errors and mistakes. What I find is I typically speak very well. I typically don't type all that well. And so frequently I'll type something and I'll notice later on that it wasn't as good as it could have been. If it's a really, really important communication and it has the ability to have great impact, perhaps have a coworker proofread it for you. They will have a tendency to find mistakes that you will not, in the inverses of them as well. And then know when to step away. Sometimes it's good to make a response. Other times it's good to just go, I think right now may not be the best time for us to talk about this, and walk away. On a personal note, I can tell you that for me as a person, I have gotten in trouble more often times for the things that I have said than the things that I haven't said. And so sometimes it's good to just turn on your heel, walk away, and think about things for a little bit, and you'll find that your responses are usually a little more eloquent later than they are in the heat of the moment. So I hope you enjoy this particular module. There's a lot to be gained from it, and it is always one that you're more than welcome to go back to and take a look at a later time and probably still gain some really good insight from.